Hello, everybody. This is Ruth Polston from The Life That Wins. Oh, it is a life that wins. Thank the Lord for Jesus. So, let's go. I'm going to start out, we're going to talk about Job today, but actually before we get there, I've titled this, You Want My Candy. My husband had, when he was through preaching, he had two lines, one for the older people that come out, and then one for the children that would go into his office. And inside of his office, he had a drawer that was full of candy. And so he had a little trick. And whenever they were released to go back in there, he could reach around in the middle drawer and get to the back of the drawer and turn a little thing. So when the children came up to the drawer, he'd give them a code, like DTT or something, you know. And so when they'd say that, he'd do that little trick back there, and they thought that was the code that opened it. So they were so proud of themselves, and they dived in there and got their candy and went out, and they were happy. One day a little fellow came by. He was very, very eager to get back and get the candy. And so he went up to my husband's trousers and robe and said, "Pastor," he said, "candy." He didn't pay attention to him. Went on shaking hands with the grown-ups, and here was the children waiting to go in and taking their turn. And pretty soon he came back again and said, "Pastor, candy." My husband looked out at him and he said, "Go away." Well, that was not something this little guy was used to. And so he said, "You don't love me. You love my candy." Well, the little boy, he went away and he got to thinking about it. Pretty soon he came back and he was tugging just very gently on his trousers, and he said, "Pastor, I love you." "Oh," he said, "okay, let's go get the candy." So away they went to get the candy. Well, I think that works into our message today pretty well. Sometimes we like to serve God for candy. And what happens when God takes the candy jar away? Well, Job was that kind of person. He didn't know he was a bargaining chip. But God was running the world one day when Satan walked by and he said, "Where have you been today?" "Oh, I'm going up and down the world, the earth." And he said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Just seeking whom you may devour." And he said, "Have you seen my servant Job?" "Oh," I said, "I couldn't touch him." "No." "Why?" "Oh," I said, "you got a hedge about him." He said, "Is that right?" He said, "Yeah, you take away his hedge, you'll see who he loves." So God said, "I think he needs to know some people love me for myself." So he is a living proof that God can be loved for God. I love the story I hate to go through what Job did, but he got tested then because God pulled that hedge around away from him. He got tested in his health, had boils. He couldn't even stay at home. He was out in just sort of a trash heap or something because he couldn't even come home. And I suppose his wife came out and brought some scraps to him, and a fine help she was, because she said, "Well, Job, why don't you just curse God and die?" Whew. And so he said, "You foolish women, we took good out of the hand of God. Now shouldn't we take evil?" Well, she went pouting away. But then he lost his family. He lost friendships, real friendships. And there wasn't much he didn't lose. And the Lord had said, "Don't you dare touch his life." So the devil knew that he had a restraining order on him. So, 3 friends, I guess if you could call them friends, if these are friends, then who needs enemies? But they had heard about Job because he was one of the most outstanding men in the whole East. Children just loved to come and be around Job. And so the whole area did. They respected Job. So they came to see him and were going to comfort him. And they got close to him, and here he was, scraping boils, sitting down in pain. Well, they sat there for 7 days, not saying a word. Well, maybe Job was getting some comfort out of that. I don't know. At least they came. But you know, they began to pull out their religiosity, I guess we could. There must be some reason that Job has got all these problems. Yeah, he's probably a bad person and we didn't know it. So they started in on him. Now they'd have been better if they'd have stayed there and just kept looking at him and not saying a word and kept their mouth shut. But no, that wasn't enough. They had to prove that Job must be wrong. Did you ever have anybody like that? I had one time, and maybe more, but this one stands out. And every time that I was talking with them, I was so discouraged, and it was always a competition, and I never liked that. I never liked that. But anyway, I know just a fraction, a little bit. So this went on, day after day, scraping his balls. It looked like maybe Job might not make it. And he would say, "You know, God doesn't answer me. See, we told you so." Yeah. He said, "If you were right." Now, their names were, of course you didn't care about their names anyway, but I think even their names, I would never name a child that. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Jophar. Don't name your kids that. Well, anyway, so they picked on him, and picked on him, picked on him. And finally, he got a little testy at times. He says, "Well, you seem to have all the knowledge and so forth." But he said, "I know God myself." "Oh, you can't know our God. No, you wouldn't have all this happening to you. No, something wrong with you." Well, poor Job, day after day, he had to battle them. He battled his physical. He battled separation. And the children didn't come anymore. They didn't want to touch Job. You know, they ran away and almost would make fun of Job. It was tough. And so one day, he said, "Oh, that I know. If I could just know where I could find him." "Where are you, God?" why aren't you talking to me? Well, of course, they just pounced right on that, Good. It's finally, now they're going to confess. He's going to confess some terrible sin that he's been in. He couldn't think of any. And that would frustrate them terribly. That went on for almost a year. And finally, at the end of it, God had had enough. And the Bible said he came in a whirlwind. And he came, first of all, he had a few things to correct with Job, because Job got a little testy. And he said, where were you? You say you know me so well. Where were you when I created the crocodiles? Where were you when I did this? And he said, were you around? Well, no, I wasn't. It's okay, go ahead, lay it on. And so he could take anything off of God, because at least God was talking to him. And so he said, you just keep on, because the more you talk to me, God, he said, I thought I knew you, and I did. But he said, I used to hear about you through my ears, but now my eyes see you for sure. Well, as soon as God wound up sort of taking care of Job, he turned on those three men, and he said, you're not even going to go home unless Job prays for you. Boy, what a letdown. Well, they wanted to go home. They wanted to get away from God. If this is the way God did, he defends Job, then we've been wrong. That's right. They were wrong. And so God said, all right, Job, you pray. And the Bible said Job prayed for his friends. Isn't that precious? And that kind of goes along with Matthew, where he said to love your enemies. Well, he passed the test. And they went on home. Well, God was all through. The bargaining chip was over. God had won. And so had Job. And hang in there with God when the trials come, the hard things. And you know what happened? The Bible says he turned the captivity of Job right around. And it was just like getting over a sickness or something. And the boils began to heal. And then it says that his friends, real friends, began to come to him. He had lost money. He was broke. And so they would bring him money. And pretty soon he was stacking up money that his real friends were bringing to him. The family members were coming. And he was being surrounded. And the Bible tells us in the last chapter of Job, it said that he had another family. See, you read me, he lost all of his family. They died in that earthquake. All of his children died in that earthquake. And so, sure enough, and the Bible said that his daughters were the most beautiful in that whole part of the world. They were well known. And then he became famous, more famous than he was before. And the Bible said he lived a long time, and he was one of the greatest men in the East. So, should we not sometimes, when life is going the other direction, should we say the Lord knows? He will bring me out of trouble. Job proved it. He proved, yes, that God doesn't have to be loved for his candy. No, he doesn't. He just wants to be loved because he's God. Faith is the victory. know that you love God for God. Have a wonderful week. God bless you. Ruth Ann Polston, Life the Winds.